Well, I'm excited to have our next guest speaker here in MKT 365 Esports Marketing. Um, David Muhall is the Global Head of Business Development and Partnerships at Riot Games. So I'm really excited to have him join us just to tell you a little bit about his role at a publisher, but then also just hear about his background into esports. And so welcome, David.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Good to see everyone. Happy Friday.
Yeah, happy Friday. So David, why don't you just start off telling about it? You started to tell me a little bit about before class, but let's just tell the students a little bit about sort of your background, how you got into esports, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, I can go way back, I guess, would be the best way to
Okay.
I've got I feel like I've had two lives, two lives after school, I guess. So straight out of high school, I played professional rugby league for about 6 years. With in Australia and New Zealand, and then spent my last few years in France. But one of the things that I knew was that I wasn't going to retire on what I was making, basically in sports. So basically, I did my business degree while I was playing. And one of the things that I was really interested in, because as part of my job was to go to sponsorship dinners and do activations and a lot of the marketing stuff that the company or the team was doing. And I always put my hand up for that, and I'd always sit down with the owners of the companies that were partnering with them and just ask questions. And it was really interesting for me to sort of see why they were doing that, and when I finished playing, it was what I really wanted to get into. So when I finished playing, I moved back to Australia. Started working actually for a club that I used to play against, and we basically had to. The story is basically this club had a really bad year. The best player had left for France the year before, like overnight. They'd come last. It was just having like crowd troubles, and they hired a new CEO, and the new CEO basically cleaned house. And I was a part of the rehire to rebuild the club, and it was kind of negative brand equity, right? So one of the things that we did was we built out the structure of like who do we want to work with? And so what we ended up doing was we're building this amazing portfolio of partners and actually making it one of the biggest portfolios in Australian sport. From there, I went to V8 Supercars, which is a racing series that follows the Formula One. And then that sort of got me a little bit of experience, not only in Australia and New Zealand, but throughout Asia, a little bit in the Middle East. And then from there, went back into rugby for a little while. But then my wife, who was American, had our first child, and she wanted to move back to the US. So once I moved back to the US, I didn't have a green card, but I was in the process of getting one, so I was doing a lot of consulting work. I don't know whether any of you know this, but there's a band called the Wiggles, the kids band. They're an Australian band. It's actually the biggest music export out of Australia. They've been going for 20, 30 years. I actually knew them through my work. And when I told them I was moving to the US, they said we need someone in North America. So I basically managed the Wiggles in North America for a couple of years, throughout all the concerts and their touring and everything like that, and a lot of their IP and brand work, even through some licensing stuff as well. Once I got my green card, then one of my goals was always to work sort of American bat and ball. And I got a job working at the Sacramento Kings, which at the time was sort of on the fence about whether they were going to relocate to Seattle or not. And they'd just been purchased by Vivek, who's still the current owner. And they were going to stay in Sacramento, and they were building out an arena. So they built Golden One Center. So I was a part of sort of that growth within the region as well. Once when I was there, they started diving into a little bit of esports with the NBA. So they had the NBA 2K League. And so I was a part of building out that structure as well. Once we started doing that, it was quite interesting. I had a few friends who owned some companies in the space as well, so I used to talk to them a lot about the space, and they always kept saying, if you're going to work in gaming, you're going to work in gaming. Riot Games is clearly the best company to work for. Um, and I just so happened, I think it was 3 or 4 years into my Kings thing, his job popped up, and it was called, Project A at the time. And Project A turned into what's now Valorant. And Basically, I went for the job there, I got the job, and Valorant was basically the number two game of League of Legends, right? So of Riot Games, and it's a big deal because for a really really long time, Riot Games was just League of Legends, and it was a different genre, something that we'd never done before, and so basically my job was to be a part of the team to build out the structure of a global esports and what that looks like. So take what we're doing with League of Legends, but create it with Valorant. So that means regional leagues all around the world, a tier two system, a collegiate system, and then the global competition on top of that. And how do we build that out? You know, taking the same principles of what we took from League of Legends, but like what they did well, what they're not doing well, and then build this new structure. And so Valorant launched one of the biggest gaming launches in history. It's the fastest growing esport in history. It's the second biggest esport behind League of Legends now. And it's actually, doing very, very well financially. It's actually, I'm going to say, probably carrying the company right now. So that game launched, but my job evolved over time within Riot. I've been at Riot for nearly, 5.5 years now, and it sort of grew to not just focusing on Valorant, but focusing across all of the portfolio of Riot Games, which includes all of the games, all of the esports, all of our music. People joke that Riot's an excellent music company that makes okay games. And our TV series, which is Arcane, which we've just finished season 2 with. So we are. It's like working at Disney, I guess, would be the best way to put it. It's not just focusing on the one thing. We're all about music, fashion. We're really that source of entertainment for that, younger generation. So when we look at it, how we're going to market and how we're partnering with people, we always look at how's that going to elevate the experience for our players and our fans, and that's sort of start one, and then we work from there. So that's kind of my journey to where I am right now. It's
Yeah,
long and
no,
story.
that's great, David. I appreciate it. We before we brought you in here to class, we looked at Riot Games as a business. So we kind of did a little bit of a sort of in-class case study, just looking at um, the core business and then also all of these sort of extensions that you've sort of just talked about. Um, I guess the question I have is, how does that work in terms of when you're looking at developing music or you're looking at developing a Netflix television program? Um, how do you consider sort of the demographics, and how does that sort of, the users, do they pair with the people that are actually buying these other sort of products or services that you're developing?
Not always.
Okay.
So we have this. It's kind of a mantra in the company. It's called play, watch, play. And the goal is to sort of continually loop that play, watch, play. So that means that you may not play League of Legends, but you may love Arcane. And the goal for us is to have people in that universe, because if they get into that universe, they're going to want to, seek our product regardless of whether it's playing the game, watching the product, or, buying something. And so it's very much it's not so much we're focusing on that one piece of the community. We're not just all about gamers. There are people who just listen to our music. So I saw a stat the other day that I think we're like our music channel on Spotify is like top 30 in the world. Um, and it's billions of downloads. And we produce this music not just because it's fun to put against like a cinematic or something. We do it because we want to be able to create that lore, and really immerse people in that sort of world of what we're trying to create.
Right. One of the things that we sort of we've been talking about is just the idea that um, there seems to be a trend, and I don't know if it's developed as fast as folks had hoped, but the trend of creating sort of in-person programming and experiences, and potentially even looking at, you know, esports specific arenas. Where is that at today? Like, as I know where we thought it was going to go, but where is it today in reality?
Um, it's that there are specific arenas for esports. We don't really use them. Like we have our own, like we've built our own just because of there's a need. Like we have one in Korea, one in Brazil, one in Germany, one in LA. But we don't. For us, it's not. We want to share it with everyone, right? So we don't want to be fixated to one certain region, right? So I'm next week I'm flying to Bangkok to we're holding a Valorant tournament there right now. And then I'll be in Toronto, and then we go to Paris, and then so we're trying to service all parts of the world. When we sell out arenas as well, right? So it's the scale that we're working on right now is we'll sell 20,000 people to an arena, and our League of Legends finals, I think 70 million people were watching online. So like our scale is a little bit different. I think at the lower tier, I think there's a world there where it does make sense to have a fixed space, but I don't think there's enough right now for it to happen. I think there's more players coming online that it'll eventually be that way. And what I've found is most sporting organizations now have their own esports team. And if it's
Mhm.
not a sporting organization, it's actually a sports person. So just in our ecosystem, Messi, Neymar, who else? Aguero, they all have teams. So it's pretty normal for a sports person or a sports team to be investing in esports.
Yeah. What so I know we talked a little bit before class. Um, what's sort of the biggest similarities and I would say differences between working, let's say, at the Kings and now working at Riot Games? What have you sort of what now that you've been in both sort of properties or sports, what are sort of those things that are in common and things that are just unique to esports?
Um, I would say so. There's quite a lot of similarities, but there's a lot of differences as well, right? Excuse me. Um, so uh, it- so the NBA, especially if you're working with a team in the NBA, is very regional. So it doesn't really matter whether or not you know you think the NBA is a global brand, it's still a regional product. And so a lot of the things that you're doing is very, very focused on your area. Whereas what I'm doing in esports right now, it is unapologetically global. We reach all parts of the world. So on any given day, I'm having discussions in Asia, Middle East, Europe, and it services that market. On a continuous basis. One of the best things, and probably the best way I try and explain it to people is that with the NBA, with the NFL, with any other sport really, it's on linear television, right? So there's only so much you can do from a marketing standpoint when you're on television. About 97% of people watch esports on a device. And while they're watching, they're used to being spoken to. They're used to clicking on things. So that extra layer of integration is so much more impactful. So what we do when people are watching, we talk to them and we drop stuff. So we may have like an activation which happens at a certain moment, which then drops. We puts a drop down and people click on it and they claim prizes. That level of activation for any brand is that level of integration with for any brand is so much more powerful than someone just watching it on TV and saying, "Oh, that looks good. I might go to the shop and buy it." Or it kind of cuts out that layer of extra level of extra stage of having to claim something because one, they're used to doing it when they're watching, and two, they can do it when they're watching, and it's something that they actually like to do. So when I'm talking to companies about the difference between sports and esports, it's funny because I start calling it legacy sports now. Um, that it's it's a product that talks to people in real time, activates in real time, and you can't get that on with television.
So do you think so when we look at sort of and I'll use the term you used, the legacy sports, you're seeing a real shift in regional sports networks.
Um,
And do you think that you think these properties will then take the esports model and say, we're gonna take it in-house and just do this same sort of streaming and have this sort of same flexibility like you talked about?
So it's already happening,
Yeah.
right? So the NFL is already on Prime. It's already on, sorry, it's already on like Amazon.
Hmm.
It's already on like it's on Twitch, right?
Yeah.
Like it's already happening. Um, it's going to take time because if you look at the age, the people watching, like the difference in age groups, like demographics, it's like, it's a much older audience. So I feel like there's probably a generation or two that needs to churn through it before they can do that, fully. But so we probably about during COVID, we had to pivot really quickly around how we produced our content. And what we did is we built these broadcast facilities, and if you go to any venue, you see all those broadcast trucks next to the venue. Basically, what these facilities does, it takes the need for those out. And so we've got one in Seattle, one in Dublin. Spent about $50 million building them. And basically, what it is we can broadcast from anywhere in the world, send the signal to these trucks without having all of this equipment and all these people on site, spit it out in 25 languages instantaneously, and then to all the feeds that are all around the world. And so we have these facilities. It's actually one of the things that I'm working on right now, is that a lot of the companies like the baseballs of the world, they want these facilities now because they it's so costly to produce all of this content that they're like, well, how do we minimize costs? And we've created something just by need with through COVID that that has created this. And the WSL, which is the World Surf League, they were in Hawaii last week, the week before. They're in Portugal this week. They're actually using our services now. So we only use about 35% of the facilities. And some of the stuff that we're doing now is talking to them. We're talking to Netflix. We're talking to, a bunch of companies around, all the content that they're producing. Don't spend so much money because everyone's going to live sports now, like all of the streaming platforms. And they don't want to be sending, 200 people with 30 trucks because it's so expensive, that they can now cut that cost out and use those facilities. Um, so we're a little bit ahead of the game in that sense, and I do think that sports is sort of transitioning into how people consume that content. I think it's going to take a little bit more time with just people's they're used to turning on the TV and watching sports.
Yeah. Do you think they like the Netflix and the Peacocks of the world now that are acquiring these live assets? Do you think they're going to start to try to like monetize them like traditional linear TV? Like, is that going to be the goal here?
Yeah, absolutely. I think they will. I think it's happening already.
Okay. Um, I know you sent me a video. Do you want me to show that?
Yeah. So just to I always anything that I start with this video because um it gives a really good explanation of Riot and how we think. It also is much better than me talking, so it's a lot more entertaining. But uh, I always try and start any talk or any meeting that I have with this video. And the reason why is because we're not just about the game. We're about the community. We're always player first, and this sort of gives you an idea of how we think about things.
Okay, so why don't I show this video real quick? Everybody can everybody see this? Yes? Anybody?
Yeah, you can.
You can see it, guys. You can see it. Okay, good. All right, I'll show this, and then maybe we'll kind of open it up as questions. I know the students had some questions for you, David. So let's.
The success of League of Legends has always given license to keep reinvesting. How do we make the game better? How do we make the company better? How do we do more things, in terms of music or level up our art or esports and all these community events or explore animation? Like it gives
I
us
don't.
tool to
Can
do
anyone see the
more
video? I can only
art.
see the one page. So
Riot's a place where inspiration and spark can be chased and followed all the way through.
Now let's start this party.
League of Legends is the biggest mobile game in the world.
A true League of Legends experience that you can play on mobile. You'll need to think quick to make on-the-fly decisions.
Champions, position them on your board and watch them go.
When we shipped Valorant, I was like, does that magic happen again? I think we're literally just starting to scratch the surface.
We're building a fighting game here, right?
We are still the are coming.
This whole event is so next level. Insane. Here we go. Been a place, only talking the eat out. Me too, again. Little town.
All right, so that was great. All right, so why don't we open it up to some questions here? What do for the students here? Any oh, did everybody see it? Everybody heard?
I don't think it was working. That's fine. Feel free to
Was it
send
not? Was it not? It was showing, right? The video.
No, it was frozen for me. So
All right. Well, I'll share it with
yeah, feel free to share
with everybody. I'll share with everybody in Canvas. All right. So let's open up to some questions here that you have for David. What do we got? Anybody? All right. Well, you guys think of questions. You guys should be prepared, but that's David. So talk to the students a little bit about your role in business development. What's that mean? What's your day-to-day look like? How are you, just how are you negotiating? How are you finding potential sponsors, I'm assuming, or partners that want to get involved in Riot games?
Yeah, so I'm in charge of basically any revenue outside of in-game purchases at Riot. So it's basically I have a team in Europe, in Asia, in Brazil, all over the world. It's about 100 and something people. Basically what we do is we look for brand partnerships that help. It's very similar to sport, right? Where you see branding during a game for our tournaments. And the global tournaments, the scale that we have kind of compares to, like, we're competing with the Premier Leagues of the world from a value perspective. It's hundreds of millions of dollars. So basically we're helping sustain the sport with our day-to-day work. And then the other stuff we do is, we work with companies around game launches, around product launches, around, content launches like Arcanes of the world. We're launching a fighting game shortly called 2XKO. We're doing a lot of work with some companies there around and how we leverage that launch. And so basically, first and foremost, when we talk to a company, we want to make sure that they're going to elevate the experience for our players and our fans, because if it doesn't tick that box, we're not going to do it. Like, we're not about brand slapping. It's very much an integrated experience. Everything is bespoke for us. And so we'll sit down with the company and we'll talk about what they're trying to achieve, and how they'd like to talk to our market. And then we basically structure a partnership that provides that for them, so it ticks their boxes, but also provides what we're looking for as a company as well. And financially, it's great, right? But the main focus for us is that what can they do better than what we're doing right now when we're talking to the audience, right? So that is one of the sort of the keys for us, because it's one of the things that we always want to do is just make sure that it's we're servicing the player and the fan. And if we start being very transactional, then we lose that. And that's why we've been able to build this really loyal fan base and player base as well, is because we're not just doing deals for the sake of doing a deal. We're doing a deal with a company that wants to work the way that we want to work.
Yeah, I was thinking, as you're describing it, you almost need to protect your own brand.
Very much so. Riot is very protective of their IP. If you look at someone like Fortnite, right? Fortnite has a different model to us where they're doing a lot of in-game brand collaboration stuff, and it works really well for them. But it's not how we want to structure our deals. And it's something that we've spent over a decade building, and it doesn't take very long to ruin it. And we want to make sure that we're protecting that. So a lot of the things that we do right now, like have a couple of meetings today to talk about, how we're showing up in the market with a couple of the things that we're doing right now. And it's all about basically protecting Riot's IP and protecting Riot's brand and how we're perceived in the market.
Yeah. Do you think, like, the initiative for the television programming or the music division, do you think that can capture that sort of casual fan or non-gamer to Riot?
Well, it has. So
Okay.
yeah, so that's the goal, right? Like, our previous CEO was very much, we want to be the next Disney. Our current CEO is not like that, but we want to focus on what we're good at. But we also, the way that we look at it is we're the source of entertainment for our fans, for our players. So whether we're doing a collaboration with Louis Vuitton, or we're doing a music release with Imagine Dragons, or last year we did it with what's it called, Linkin Park. So, like, it's where we want our fans, like, if they want to consume music, they can go to our channel. If they want to look at what's happening within fashion, they look at some of the stuff that we're doing with our agents in Valorant, or the collaborations that we're doing from a brand perspective. From an entertainment point of view, we create those moments in sport that only sport can create. So we really want to give that sort of 360 view of, like, we can touch each part of it. Even if you're not interested in the game, you might be really interested in Arcane, or you might be really interested in the music that we're producing. And we're producing so much of that content, that whether it be music or video or gaming, that there's something for everyone. And if you know a lot about our games, we spend a lot of time building the lore of the game, like the background of who our characters are. Like that's why we can do Arcane. And the reason why we do that is because we want people to be invested. We want them to be invested in the character, and we want them to be able to sort of resonate with that. A really good example is Valorant. When we launched Valorant, you know, it's situated in future Earth, and agents are from all over the world. But when we continually release new agents from different parts of the world, but when we do those releases, we want to make it as authentic as possible during those releases, and make sure that so the background work that we do just for that release around the agent is quite in depth. The music that we use, the clothing, the way that they act, is very authentic. And we want to make sure that that carries across. And so the reason why we do that is because it doesn't matter where you are in the world, you'll resonate with that, with a character. And that's the goal for us. So it's a really important thing for us. I think we go sort of the extra mile more than most companies. But it's satisfying for us because I think it really tells that story and gets people more engaged.
Okay. Again, we want to be respectful of your time here, David. I do appreciate it. We got a little bit of time left here. So again, any questions here?
Yeah.
And yeah, go for it,
So
bud.
you were talking, well, thank you for talking to us, but you mentioned keeping the loyalty of your players. And with you have competitors like Rainbow Six Siege who are announcing new things and Marvel Rivals. How do you keep your fan base so loyal? And like from your perspective, like what do you do to get them to not drift into other games?
Yeah, look, we know it's going to happen, right? Like everyone watches different sports, everyone plays different games. Like we're not we think that a healthy ecosystem is healthy all around, right? Like we obviously want to get the lion's share of them. I think the way that we structure our games and the way that we build our games is that there's a new meta constantly, but there's also there's also a refresh. Like every couple of weeks, there's like a new patch where it might change the meta and how we play the game. So it's never stagnant. We might introduce a new map, we might introduce a new agent, and that continuous sort of evolution of if you look at you obviously Valorant, when we kicked it off to where it is now, it's a completely different game, and so it's really important for us to continually evolve that. We know that like when Marvel Rivals is doing really well right now, right? And that's fine, and we're happy about that. But I think the longevity of games and the success of games is building that community that they'll always come back, right? They may sort of play something for a couple of months, but they'll come back. They'll come back because the game's evolved. And so it's sort of our job to sort of give them that, you know, sense of FOMO, I guess, that they're going to miss out if they don't continually play. And it kind of loops into that play, watch, play mentality, right? So, we have a pretty consistent portfolio of pretty consistent sort of games from an esports perspective. And the goal is you may not be playing the game at the moment, but you might watch esports and you'll be like, okay, I've just watched the game. I really want to play now. And you'll get back into playing. So we're trying to continually build that loop. And there's periods of time where it'll be stronger than others, but we know that if we can build that consistency and that loyalty, then they'll come back to the game.
Yeah. Okay. Good question. Thanks, Ben. Anybody else? Questions for David?
You guys are easy.
Yeah, these guys are going easy on you here, David.
Oh.
All right, I'll ask a question because I always think it's an important one. Um, what advice would you have for students looking to break into either legacy sports or esports, and what's the best way to sort of to go in and get involved in this sort of industries?
Um, I'm not going to say you got to be passionate about it, right? Because everyone probably says that. I think you've got to have an interest in it, right? Like, it's there are a lot of different jobs that will give you more than what more than what sport will give you, or more than what gaming will give you. I think you've got to love what you're doing, but I think you've got to be interested in the product. I think you've got to be interested in how the operations work. And I think sport, everyone wants to work in sport, right? But once you work in sport, you're like, oh, it's just like another job. Um, so there's no sort of uh, I wouldn't say that. I think the best thing to do, like, I guess, would be uh, depending on what you want to, sort of what area of sport you want to work in, right? Like, know your discipline first. That's probably the best part. Like, if you're working in law, like, you know, know law really well and then work in, and then move into sport, or like if it's sales, get an understanding of what that means and then work, and then work in sales. Because I think a lot of people go into sports or gaming and think, I'm in gaming now, or I'm in sports now, and it's great, but then it doesn't turn into sort of, I think that's only sort of like a 12-month sort of, period. Um, so you've got to really want to be a part of that sort of industry, or that discipline, I guess. So pick a discipline, and then if you want to work in sport, then go into it. That's probably my advice.
Yeah, the honeymoon doesn't last long, and you're either going to love it or you're going to figure that this isn't what you want to do.
Yeah, and look, like all jobs, you start at the bottom, right? Like, and be careful, you have to work. And with sport, a lot of people want to work in sport, so you have to be, it's competitive.
Yeah, yeah. Well, again, we really appreciate your time. It's great to connect with you. It's the first time we were fortunate enough to have someone from the publisher side, and I think you gave the students some really incredible perspective on a lot of different areas. So thank you very much. I do appreciate it. If any of the students want to get in touch with you, is there a good way to kind of do that?
Um, LinkedIn's probably the best way.
Okay.
You've got my email address. If there are any
Yep.
other questions that pop up, feel free to ping me, and I'll answer it the best I can.
All right. Well, thank you so much, David. I do appreciate it, and hopefully we'll stay in touch, and we'll talk soon.
No problem. Thanks, everyone. Appreciate your time.